Morning, everybody.
Morning.
So we're in a new location, and we're in this new location because we're setting up downstairs today for the COVID testing. And as I look around, though, I think this is pretty comfortable. There's more room here than in the base medrash, right? And we were pretty full the last couple of weeks, so maybe we'll stay up here, and then we can get some more people to come too. We're going to be running just about 10 minutes. We're going to stop 10 minutes early today because of the fact that the COVID testing is going on downstairs. They're starting at noon, and those of us who want to be tested, you'll be able to get on the head of the line, and those that don't can go right out the front of the building. So you don't have to encounter the people that are setting up for testing or walking in to be tested and so on. And Avi Cooperberg, who is the head of the Bikur Cholim here at Torah Or, will be coming upstairs at 10 minutes to 12 to explain to us what's happening and how it's going to work. And hopefully none of us get it, God forbid, and we go on. As far as the Gemaras, they are on order, and we're waiting, just like everything else. The supply chains, they did go out FedEx ground, so should be here.
But they went out last week, so we don't know why they're not here.
Should be here.
Like everything else.
Yes, ma'am. Do I have any? Are you? Is everybody uncomfortable? Comfortable?
Lower the degree or two.
Okay.
Don't make it too cold, Mark.
I'm not.
You know, I grew up behind the counter in the bakery. My family had a bakery. It was pretty busy, and we were right across the street from Our Lady of Peace Church in Fords, New Jersey. They had a mass every hour. So the mass went for 45 minutes, and then at the end of the mass, they would all come into the bakery, and we used to have those numbers on the wall. We went through 100 numbers every hour, every mass, and so we had a lot of people working behind the counter in the bakery store. So maybe we had 4 or 5 women, and so I would help out on the weekends, and my father and maybe his brothers-in-law were partners, and the ladies would always go over to him. One would say to him, "Mo, it's very hot in here," so, and he'd say, "Well, I'm comfortable." Then another lady would go over and say, "Mo, it's very cold in here." He said, I'm comfortable. So for me, I'm comfortable, whatever it is, and I hope that everybody is comfortable, and I hope that you'll get so excited with what you're learning you won't pay attention to the temperature. I just put this up here because it might be a little bit confusing what page we're on. So if you're opening the book from the left side, that's the English side, we're on page 216. And we're on page 216, the last paragraph on the page. And if you're opening from the right-hand side, and by the way, the handouts have both. If you open for the right-hand side, so you're using the Ivrit, so we're on Daf Kuf. Okay? Everybody got it?
Well, what page on here?
So page 216, there's a page number.
Oh, I see now.
Okay, so if you're using the English, you open from the left-hand side like a regular English book, and you go to page 216. And if you're opening it as a Hebrew book, from that side, we're on page Kuf, actually page 100. Okay, so this is just a blow-up of what we have in front of us in our books or our photocopies. Okay, so we're getting off onto a little bit of a tangent, which is quite common. You're going to find that the more you get into the Talmud, you're going to find a lot of times they go off into different topics, and somehow it's very interesting what's happening because you do learn a little bit about the culture and the history by the tangents. And we're going to learn something interesting here about how they set up to eat, how their dining rooms were set up. They're different from ours, and we're going to get into that in a second. So we're just about, if you're in the Hebrew side, count down 11 lines on Daf Kuf, right? 100. Count down 11 lines. Okay, and if you're going from the English side on page 216, it's the bottom paragraph on page 216 on. Okay, and so we're talking about what when are you permitted to start a meal if it's Erev Yontif or Erev Shabbos? So if you're Friday afternoon, are you allowed to start having a meal after the time to daven mincha? Right. So we had a discussion about that, and they said that it's samach lemincha, near mincha. So if you remember, we talked about there are two standards for mincha. There's what they call mincha katana and mincha gedola. Right, Tova is showing us big and small. Mincha gedola, large, means there's a big span of time that you can daven mincha. Mincha katana means smallest span of time. And the way that the time is calculated is mincha gedola starts 6.5 hours into the day. Okay, now I'm going to test you. Does that mean it's 12:30?
No.
No, what does that mean?
However you divide the day that day.
You shouldn't
I
answer.
can't answer.
So what we said is that
From when the sun rises.
exactly right. Between sunrise and sunset, we divide the day into 12 segments. Each of those segments is an hour. So in the summertime, what they call Tekufas Tammuz. Tammuz is the hottest summer month. Those hours could be as much as an hour and a half long. And in the winter time, which we're in right now, there could be maybe in 45 minutes. So it's 6.5 halachic hours into the day. That's when the time starts to daven mincha. That's according to mincha gedola. Mincha katana, small mincha, starts at 9.5 hours into the day. And then there's another concept called plag mincha. Maybe you've heard this, or some people want to daven Friday night at plag. The plag is when you split in half the amount of time for mincha katana. So mincha katana is 2.5 hours before sunset. So you split that in half, so it's 1.5 hours before. Plag means half or division. So we said that from the time of mincha it's 2.5 hours because they're using mincha katana. And when it says samach lemincha, means near mincha, that means 9 hours into the day, so 3 hours before.
Could I ask a question?
Sure.
You said mincha ktana is really 9.5 hours after aliyat hashemesh, after aliyah, right?
After sunrise.
Sunrise. So
Right.
if sunrise, let's assume, is at 4 in the morning or 5.
Okay.
So 9 hours will be by 2:30. It's not so close to Shabbat that they can have mincha mariv together.
So remember, if sunrise is 4, which is that's pretty early, but let's say so that would mean. Now, what time is sunset? If sunrise is 4, maybe sunset is 6 or 7 o'clock.
Right, correct.
Right. So now,
Or much earlier.
Correct.
right. So if you've got such a long day, so you have a longer period of time that you need to divide by 12 to establish your halachic hours. So it's never going to be close to Shabbos. It's always going to be, if mincha gedola is going to always be 5.5 halachic hours before Shabbos starts.
It could be by 1, 2 in the afternoon, right? Mincha gedola.
It depends. So if we're talking, let's say we're talking about, let's say it's summertime now, and the hours are 90 minutes long, right? So, and let's say sunrise was 6 o'clock. So I'm losing myself. 6.5 of those halachic hours, which are 90 minutes each. So it's 6.5 times 90, right? So that's 600 minutes, right? So 600 minutes, so it's 10 hours. Okay, that means you could have a very long day, right? And I mean, in the summertime, you could have it could be light until 7 o'clock or even later sometimes, right?
Like 8 o'clock.
8 o'clock, right? So that's the idea. So we calculate based on the reality, what's actually happening, and that's really a feature of our religion, is that we're sort of in control because we're calculating. We're not slaves to the calendar or to the clock. It's depending on what's actually occurring in the world. And so that calculation of halachic hours, that's an important one for us. And once they come onto that subject, now they want to know, well, what happens? Suppose we did start a meal, and now it gets to be close to Shabbos, or even Shabbos. Maybe we're having a long meal, and Shabbos Shabbos arrives. What do we do? Okay. So the Gemara says, it starts out, it says Tanya, so we're going this 11 lines down. Mafsikin l'Shabbosos, Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. So Rabbi Yehuda says, if Shabbos arrives and we're eating a meal, so let's say Friday afternoon, Mindel and I sit down to eat, and we're having a nice meal, we lose track of time because Marcia and Gary came over, and all of a sudden, it becomes Shabbos. What do we do now? So the Mishnah says, we stop. We stop when Shabbos comes, according to Rabbi Yehuda. Okay? Rabbi Yossi disagrees with Rabbi Yehuda. He says, Emav Sikin. He says we do not stop, we continue the meal. Okay, so you have Rabbi Yehuda say we stop, and now we make Shabbos. And Rabbi Yossi says we continue our meal, we finish the meal, and then we make Shabbos. Now the Gemara says, Umaseh Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, for Rabbi Yehuda, and Rabbi Yehuda is in brackets, which means we include that text, for Rabbi Yossi. So you have Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, and Rabbi Yehuda, and Rabbi Yossi, Shoyim Mesubim ba'Akko, and they were reclining in Akko. What does it mean they were reclining? Their style of a dining room, and we're talking about these people are not poor people, and they would, each person would get a little, like a divan, like a couch they would recline to eat, and the waiter would bring each one of them a little table. Each person had his own table. So here they are, the three of them, they're reclining to have their meal, and they happen to be in Akko, okay, and V'Kiddush Aleim Hayom, and now it became Shabbos. So what's to be done? Well, Amar le Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel said to Rabbi Yossi, but Rebbe, he said, sir, he said, Ratzon Chanafsik, do you think that we should stop? V'nechesh l'divrei Rabbi Yehuda Chareinu, that we should consider the opinion of our friend Rabbi Yehuda. Okay? So remember, Rabbi Yossi said what? He said that we don't stop, right? Rabbi Yehuda says we do stop. And Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, what do you think we ought to do? Should we do his custom, his practice, and stop? Amar lo, so now Rabbi Yossi was upset. He said, B'chol yom v'yom ata mechabev divarai lefnei Rabbi Yehuda. He says, normally, when it comes to a discussion between me and Rabbi Yehuda, you tend to support my position. Suddenly, now you're saying when it comes to the start of Shabbos that you're going to accept his opinion and not mine, because Rabbi Shimon Gamliel said, should we wait for him, right? And there's a difference of opinion whether Rabbi Yehuda was actually at the table or not. So if he was at the table, so they're saying, should we consider his opinion? If he wasn't there, they're saying maybe we should wait for him to continue with our meal. But either way, so Rabbi Yossi is upset. He says that you always took my opinion and now you're not doing it. And then here's a line which should be familiar to a lot of us. It's from the Megillah, and he's quoting a pasuk from the Megillah to illustrate how his feelings were hurt. He says, "Hagam lechvoshes hamalka imi babayis." Are you attempting to rape the queen even with me in the house? Because if you remember the story from the Megillah, what happened? The Esther made a party. She invited Haman and Achashverosh, and Achashverosh went out to the garden because he was upset at what he had heard, and Haman fell onto Esther's bed. As she was on the same sort of a setup. Each one on their own couch, and Haman fell onto her couch. So they say there was the Malach of Real who pushed him, whatever it was. And in comes Achashverosh, and he sees Haman on top of the queen. Not so good. There was the next step for Haman was he hit the gallows.
This whole thing is not clear, because how can they start Shabbat? There must have been at least 2 hours before when they started Mincha. They won't start Shabbat if they know. So how can Shabbat happen when they still daven Mincha? There must have been at least 2 hours in between, or what? I mean, how can that be that Shabbat started when they daven?
So I can tell you that if Mindel and I went out to a meal with Marcia and Gary, sometimes you lose track of time. It could be that you're at it for a long time. and suddenly
Doesn't take that long.
She
I
think
mean-
we're davening, but we're not davening,
we're having a meal together. That's right.
Mincha doesn't take that long.
Right. So we started kind of late in the afternoon, but we started at a time that was okay to do it, and then we kind of lost track of time, and suddenly it's Shabbos.
But Mincha doesn't take that long, and they must have known when Shabbat starts, so how can they miscalculate?
Well, first of all they could have davened Mincha Gedola. They could have davened early in the day.
Well, then there's no problem. But
Well, the
in
problem
this case,
the problem is that Shabbos started. So let's say they had Mincha at 2:00 in the afternoon, which you can do if you're using Mincha Gedola, and then about 4 o'clock or 4:30 they decided to get together to have a meal, and at the time they lost track of time.
well, they're not gonna have a meal before they light the candles and make kiddush, so they know when.
Well, that's the question. The question is, this is what the Gemara is telling us is, this is what could happen, and it did happen, and it didn't happen to ordinary people. It happened to some pretty big people. Let's say that maybe they were discussing the day's daf yomi or whatever it was that they were talking about, and they lost track of time.
But it's strange that rabbis like that wouldn't leave enough time to start.
But that's part of the beauty of the Talmud. It does not hide what we might consider a fault. We might say, "Come on, man, why are you doing that?" Jill?
This meal that you're sitting down to with the Schregers, let's say,
Right?
is that your Shabbos meal?
No.
Is that,
No.
so
No,
that's
no,
lunch. It's a
no.
regular meal.
We went over to the tiki hut and whatever it was.
So it wasn't let's start the meal, the Shabbos meal.
No, so it's not the Shabbos meal. And the incident that happened to them is that it became Shabbos. They weren't paying attention about the time.
Let me
Rita.
ask you a question, you just dawned on me. There's a country where the day and night don't meet too early.
I knew somebody would ask me
Do
that.
in a country like that, where the really daylight is till 11, 12 o'clock at night, as I understand.
I know.
What do you do?
So starting Shabbos is the halbatzara, But when do you end Shabbos? That's the real problem, because you're permitted to start Shabbos early, but you can't end it early.
Correct.
Right. So in some of those cases, they're still going 12 o'clock, 12:30 later than that, and it's still Shabbos. They might go to sleep, and it's still Shabbos. Yeah, that's a problem. Fortunately, we don't have that
Don't live
problem.
there.
But yeah,
So when do they do Havdalah if they go to sleep?
they cannot do Havdalah until Shabbos is
Sometime in the morning, about wine, that's it.
right.
In Alaska, we do it all the time.
Yeah, Alaska.
Okay, so what happened? Now, so we had the incident, and Rav Yossi's feelings are hurt, and he expressed his displeasure. Omar Lay, so Rav Shimon Gamliel responded, Im Kain lo nafsik. Let's not stop. He says, why? Because Shema Yira Talmidim, because whatever they were doing, their students were observing. Right? How we always say that our kids are always watching what we're doing, and you have to be careful because you might do as I say, right? They're watching, and the students were watching to learn how to conduct themselves. So maybe the students are going to see what we did, that we interrupted the meal, right? V'yikvu halacha l'doros, and they will say, this is the way it's got to be practiced, and this will be this. So what happened? Amru, so they said, Lo zazu misham ad shekavu halacha k'Rabbi Yossi. And they did not move from that spot until they said the halacha is like Rabbi Yossi, which is what?
You don't have to.
We stop, right?
One need not
One need
not
interrupt
so-
me.
on the eve of
Right, so
Shabbos.
that's right. So Rabbi Yossi says, we do not stop the meal, we finish our meal, and then we make Shabbos. Okay. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. So now we're going to introduce a third opinion. Rabbi Yehuda said, name of Shmuel, Ein halacha lo Rabbi Yehuda, v'lo Rabbi Yossi. We do not practice according to what Rabbi Yehuda has to say, and we don't follow the tradition of Rabbi Yossi. But what do? Ella, pores mapa mekadesh. What you do is, remember, each one of them had a little table, and he said, you cover the food with a napkin and make kiddush, which is that's what we do, right? We cover the challah before we making kiddush, right? We put the challahs on the table, but we cover it as if it was not there, and we make kiddush. And he says that's what they said to do. So Eini, the Gemara says, is that so? Amar Rav Tachlifa bar Rav Dimi, Amar Shmuel. So Rav Tachlifa, the son of Avdimi, said the name of Shmuel, Kishem shemafsikin lekiddush. Okay, now comes your question. Kach mafsikin lavdala. The same thing would take place if you're eating Suda Shlishi, Shabbos afternoon, and now comes time for Havdalah. So what do? Do you continue your meal, or do you stop the meal and make Havdalah? My mafsikin, what do? Do we stop or do we not? He's lavla kiras hashulchan. Maybe we should just take the table away, because remember, each one had his own table, and the waiter brought the table, and then to end the meal, they would take the tables away. He says, lo lamapa. No, just cover the food, and then make your Havdalah. Rabba Bar Huna ikla lebe reish galusa. So Rabba, the son of Rav Huna, went to the house of the Reish Galusa, is the exilarch, that is the political leader of the Jews who were in exile. Aisu taka kame, people were sitting eating, so he sat down. They brought a table to him. Poras mapa v'kiddush. So what he did was he had a table with food on it. He put a napkin on top, put a cloth on top, and he made kiddush. Okay. Tanya nami hachi. So too we learned. V'shavin she'ein mevin es hashulchan elem ken kiddush. So from this we learn that you don't bring the food to a person until he's made kiddush. So that's why we cover it, because kiddush has to come first. You don't have the food on the table, so we cover it. But what the question was, do they bring it? Do they not bring it? But if it's brought to you, you must have it covered, because kiddush has to always come first. And so we're learning. The way that we practice is based on how they conducted themselves. So just the same way. So now they set the example for their students, and that's been carried down all the generations. And that's how we operate. So he says, okay, he says Tani Chada. So he says Im hevi poris mapa mekadosh. You cover it and you make kiddush. Tani Chada. So one learns Shavin she'em maschilin. So they both agree you shouldn't start a meal right before Shabbos. Tani Idach. The other one says Shavin shemaschilin. You could begin the meal, but you must pay attention when it comes time for Havdalah and for starting Shabbos. So Bishlam Ahadasanya Shavin she'en maschilin. So I understand what you said, where you should not begin the meal. Mishkachas lo be'erev Pesach. So that's what the first statement that we learned is that when it's erev Pesach, it's going to be, let's say tonight was going to be the Seder night, that we don't want to start a meal early. So when is it then that they both agree you could start a meal early? So inema be'erev Shabbos, if you're going to say on Friday afternoon, you could start a meal during that period between Mincha and the time that Shabbos starts. Miflag pligi. There's a difference of opinion. We just saw there's a difference of opinion, right? Lo kasha. That's not a difficulty. Pardon?
What does it mean, miflag pligi?
That means they disagree. Leflog means to disagree in Aramaic. So they have a machloket. Okay. So they say this is not a difficulty. Kan kodem tisha, kan lachar tisha. So remember, we're talking about mincha katana, which is the 9.5 hours, but then they say samuch lemincha, near mincha. So not exactly mincha, but near it. So that means they give you another half hour. So from 9 hours in the day, not 9.5. So he says kodem tisha or kan lachar tisha. It's a difference whether it's close, but maybe it's 8 hours and 59 minutes or 9 hours and a minute. But it's when it's either before, that's the cutoff point. Okay, so now how about this? Osam b'nei adam shekichu b'veis hakneses. So what we do in our shul is a little bit different from what I've seen in other shuls, and I think it's because there are a lot of single people here, so we tend to Kiddush and Havdalah, it's a little bit more extensive than what you might see someplace else. But he's saying here, somebody who made Kiddush in shul, Amar Rav, Yudei Yayin Lo Yotzu, Yudei Kiddush Yotzu. So there, in Kiddush, there is the bracha, the blessing you make on the wine, and there's also the Kiddush itself that you're saying that Shabbos has started. So the Kiddush that they made in shul does not fulfill your obligation to have the wine for Shabbos, but it does satisfy that issue about making Kiddush. So just to clarify, what happens if I am the one that leads the davening on Friday night in shul, which is not the most pleasant experience, but suppose suppose that they can't find anybody else, and I do it. So here the Chazan says Kiddush. So I've said Kiddush now. Have I fulfilled my mitzvah of saying Kiddush? I probably have, because I said the bracha, right? But now I'm going to go home and my wife is there, and maybe we have guests or whatever, and since it's my house, I'm going to say Kiddush again. Is that okay? Am I allowed to do that? I already said Kiddush. So they said, yes, it is, because I'm making it for the others in the house. So that's just a parenthetic observation. Okay, so
I have a question. So
Sure.
what you're saying is if they listen to Kiddush in shul,
Right.
it satisfies the making Kiddush, if it's a woman, let's say, and then
Right.
she goes home, but she has to do the bracha over wine.
Right.
Okay.
Very good, Marcia. Thank you. Okay, so that's the opinion of Rav. Rav and Shmuel are contemporaries. Rav is a little bit older, and they lived. Rav actually lived from the time of the Tanaim into the time of the Amoraim, which is around the year 200 in the Common Era. So he spanned both, which means he is allowed to argue with either group, whereas a regular Amorah cannot argue with a Tana. But Rav and Shmuel you'll see very common that they're going to have difference of opinion. So Rav says that he fulfilled the obligation of Kiddush, but not wine. Shmuel Amar, so Shmuel says Afidei Kiddush Liyotza. He's even the Kiddush, because he doesn't have in his mind to fulfill the obligation of saying Kiddush. He's saying it because it's a traditional thing that we say Kiddush in shul, and maybe he's saying it because there are people in the shul who are not going to be making Kiddush at home, and for their benefit, he says the Kiddush in shul. So Ela LaRav, so according to Rav, who said that he fulfilled this mitzvah, Lama Leila Kedusha Bebeisei, so why do I go home now and say Kiddush? I said Kiddush in shul already, right? So the Gemara says, Kedei lahotzi bano v'bnei beiso, in order to say the Kiddush on behalf of his children. And when it says bnei beiso, that means beiso is ishto, it means his wife. So that's the point, that you're saying it for their benefit. So even though you said it, you've probably, according to Rav, you fulfilled your mitzvah. So the question is, if you fulfill the mitzvah, why are you saying it? Because you're saying it for the benefit of other people.
What if you have no one at your table? You've made Kiddush in shul, you come home, you're alone, then what? Do you
Say
not make
why?
Kiddush? Have your Yotzei with the Kiddush you made? and
Well,
your-
you made the Kiddush, or you heard somebody else making it.
Well, both scenarios.
So if you heard someone
said
else making it,
If
so-
you said Amen to the Kiddush,
Okay. There's
aren't you
certain
Yotzei?
there are certain cases where we say Amen without the intention of fulfilling the mitzvah. We say it because the person made a bracha, but we're not intending to. An example is you did Rosh Chodesh fencing, right? Rosh Chodesh davening. Terry, you lead the davening, right? So do you say Hallel?
Yes.
Do you say Hallel with a bracha? Okay, so Terry makes the bracha for Hallel, and then we all repeat the bracha afterwards, right? So why is that? If she made the bracha and we have fulfilled our obligation because Shemea could omro, just if I hear it just like I said it, so Terry made the bracha, we said Amen, and why then do we repeat the bracha afterwards? Because it's a special case that we know we're going to be making the bracha, and therefore we answer amen to Terry's bracha, but we have in mind that we're not going to be Yotze. We're not going to fulfill our mitzvah with her bracha. We say amen to it, of course we will, but then we're going to say our own bracha. So that's like a special case. So it depends what your intent is, okay? And that's a whole other subject too. Do mitzvahs require intention? And
Is this the rule about saying Hallel that you have to say the bracha also?
that's right. That's right. When you say Hallel, right? So the chazan or chazanit, whatever, starts out. She says her bracha, and we all answer amen.
Yeah, but then you have to
And
say
then
the
we make our own
bracha.
bracha. Yes, we do. We say our own bracha. Okay, so good. You learned something today.
You know, just learned something. I never knew that.
Yeah, and it's a special case. Karen.
So what if you're in synagogue and you hear the rabbi saying Kiddush and the blessing, you say amen, but you're not drinking the grape juice or the wine.
Right.
So are you not fulfilling that mitzvah and you should go home and say Kiddush again?
So that's why Rob says so let's say you're a person who's listening, and maybe you're not able, maybe you're not you don't want to make your own kiddush. So according to Rav, you have fulfilled the mitzvah of kiddush. Now go home and drink wine because you want to. And that
You make the bracha.
you can make the bracha on the wine,
That's the
right?
bracha.
So
Just like you would if it,
Right.
weekday, if you
Is
were
there
drinking
any
the wine.
relation, any relation to when one makes kiddush at home, let's say the host make kiddush at home, and he's yotze his guests, and they say amen, and
Right.
they drink from their wine.
Right.
So why doesn't that apply, maybe I'm going off track, why would that not apply
you can't go off
to
track
when
here.
one washes Yadayim, and why doesn't that apply that everybody answers amen, and they go ahead and they eat the bread and they eat the food? Why wouldn't that apply to a bracha? When you get up and you make a bracha, and we all say amen, and we're all eating that cake,
Right.
why is that different than the?
Okay, so there's a couple of issues. First of all, with the kiddush. So let's say you all come to us for Shabbos. My Mendel is ready to
When
cook.
you're doing that.
Hey, Boris, this is part of it.
You all come to us for Shabbos,
What time would you like
and
to start?
and so I'm going to make kiddush, but I'm going to ask first: Are you going to depend on my kiddush, or you want to make your own?
Are
So.
you yotze?
So if your intention is to be yotze for my bracha, then you are yotze and you can drink the wine. When it comes to washing, that's a little bit more complicated, right? Because we're kind of lining up. We're not all sitting together in one spot. So it's kind of a difficult thing for one person to make the bracha and to satisfy everybody. Avi, did you want to? Okay, so are you? Do you want to talk to us now, or what's your situation?
It's almost 10 to 12.
They're on their way. Okay. Okay, so I want to introduce you to one of the most handsome people in the. This is Rabbi Dr. Avi Cooper-Berg, who those of you who know is doing a fantastic job with Bikur Cholim and Chesed.
Comes to us from Fairlawn.
Comes from Fair Lawn, New Jersey, right? And you can read his column in the Jewish Link if you get it. You can find it online. And he has organized that we have a company coming to do COVID testing here in the building. They should be starting at 12 o'clock. I guess they set up pretty quickly. And Avi, do you want to tell the people how the traffic is going to go? So I'm going to stop now. Avi, come up front and you can tell us. Somebody will stop me. Thank you. You can stop the video. All right, ladies, we'll have to continue.